If you're a perfectionist, giving it your all even for tasks that don't even require perfection, have overly high expectations of yourself, and notice self-doubts or self-criticism within you, this video is for you. Hey there, good to see you again for another video. If you're new to our channel, I'm Jonas, co-founder here at FlowLab, a mental fitness app that helps you find focus, motivation, and flow states with personalized meditations. Today, we have a very interesting topic, namely perfectionism. If you think about it, how often do you think that your work isn't good enough? That what you do cannot hold up against the accomplishments of others, or that anything below perfection means you failed? In this video, we want to take a closer look at these patterns. We were brought up with the idea that there shouldn't be mistakes. As the pianist Louis Lorty said, we're living in a world where most things revolve around results and achievements, success and outcomes. In order to keep up with the fast pace our world is changing with and the other 8 billion people on the planet, we need to become better and better too. It's no surprise then that many people have internalized perfectionist standards and expect a lot of themselves. We discussed perfectionism and that there's also a positive side to it in an earlier video. Today, I'd like to talk about different types of perfectionism, specifically about a type called self-oriented perfectionism. The two Canadian psychologists, Dr. Paul Hewitt and Dr. Gordon Flatt, distinguished between self-oriented perfectionism, socially prescribed perfectionism, and other-oriented perfectionism. So 3 types that differ depending on whose perfectionist standards we're talking about. Very briefly, self-oriented perfectionists have extremely high standards they impose on themselves. Socially prescribed perfectionists feel pressured when they think that others impose high standards on them, and other-oriented perfectionists impose their own ideals on others. We'll discuss the other 2 types in the future as well, but today we'll focus on the first type, self-oriented perfectionism. If you haven't watched our earlier video on perfectionism, let me remind you that perfectionism per se is not a bad thing, because being ambitious and perfectionist, especially when learning a new skill, can help us perform better and find more flow. So also when it comes to self-oriented perfectionism, having extremely high expectations of oneself, these high standards are motivating in the adaptive form, of course, since the goals and standards are self-chosen and perceived to be within one's control. It's enjoyable to be very accurate and perfectionist in a way. That's why it's also the form of perfectionism that is the most closely connected to self-improvement and associated with more flow and greater progress towards one's goal. Imagine you're playing an instrument, say the guitar, and really want to be able to play that one song. You practice for hours and repeat the same passages over and over again until you manage even the tricky parts, working on your finger picking, making sure all notes are clear, and so on and so forth. Adaptive perfectionists strive for flawlessness. They're very conscientious and able to cope with difficult situations or emotions. When speaking about the maladaptive form of perfectionism, on the other hand, there's usually a lot of self-doubt and self-criticism involved. They may feel discouraged when their performance doesn't match their expectations. They're blaming themselves for minor mistakes and believe that a perfect solution exists and that this solution must be found for each and every problem. So they tend to have a low frustration tolerance and a high need for approval from others. And I think it's very intuitive that self-criticism is related to less flow. We're too preoccupied to focus on the actual task and therefore won't be able to find this effortless deep focus. If you feel addressed by the facets that I just described, I have a few things that you can try to reduce unhealthy self-oriented perfectionism. First, make a reality check. When in the grip of unhealthy self-oriented perfectionism, we tend to set ridiculously high goals that are impossible to achieve. Yet, according to research, people with self-oriented perfectionism don't attribute their stress to the fact that their standards are impossibly to meet, but to failing to meet them. So we can try as hard as we want. What we need is a reality check. So ask yourself whether your goal is actually realistic. And digging a little deeper, why did you set it in the first place? Which needs does it fulfill? Questions like these help you get a handle on unhealthy strivings and become aware when it's worthwhile to adapt your goals. You may, for example, lower your standards or effort, which is among psychologists referred to as goal disengagement. Or if you realize that this goal is rather a compensation for an unfulfilled need, you may drop it and set a new goal instead, which would be goal re-engagement then. Make sure to formulate your goal positively. For example, my goal is to learn XY instead of my goal is to not do Z. And then use yourself rather than other people as comparison to measure progress. These goals are considered much healthier and motivating. What might also help you for a reality check is to distinguish between must-haves and nice-to-haves. Our tip number 2. I know, like a million people have probably told you that already, but there is no such thing as one perfect solution. But how do we know when something is good enough? Of course, that depends on the task and context. But distinguishing the must-haves that are absolutely essential for a successful outcome from the things that are only nice-to-haves is a great start. And you can take care of the necessary things first, before choosing which details to work on afterwards, if at all. I mean, you also wouldn't decorate your new apartment before painting the walls or assembling the furniture, would you? Some also swear by the Pareto principle. It explains that 80% of the output comes from only 20% of your time, while the remaining 20% of the output takes 80% of your time. In other words, we get hung up on the details, and it may be worth questioning whether these 20% actually make a big difference. For which tasks are 80% enough? And which other things could you tick off with the remaining time? And the last tip for self-oriented perfectionists is to become your own best friend. I mean it. You are the person you spend your entire lifetime with. That's why the way you talk to yourself also influences to a great extent how happy or annoyed you walk through life. And since self-oriented perfectionists tend to be overly self-critical and beat themselves up for every tiny mistake, plus they don't even appreciate it when they succeed, cultivating a positive inner dialogue is crucial. How would you treat a close friend in your situation? Which advice would you give to them? I bet you would find kind, encouraging words to support them. So what if you treated yourself in the same compassionate way? Feel free to train exactly that with our flow session Best Friend in the training area of optimism. There are also other ways to deal with the inner critic, for example, reflecting on the protective function of it. Imagining your self-talk as two strangers on the street and you're just a passenger listening to the absurd conversation. Some also like to imagine this inner voice as a movie character to become aware of how ridiculous it is. So there are a number of ways to handle self-criticism and cultivate a positive inner dialogue. We have flow sessions for all of these strategies too, like jokes on you, pep self-talk, or calling names. Feel free to check them out. For today, I'd like to leave you with the question, in which area of life or for which task a solid 80% would be sufficient too. Perhaps you can think of something where you tend to put way too much energy in and could save some resources for the things that really matter to you. So thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Also check out our other social media channels for more mental fitness content. Have a great day and I'll see you soon. selves. We discuss perfectionism, anything below perfection.
Das ist doch wirklich einfach nicht normal. Also es kann doch nicht alle 2 Minuten ein Feuerwehrauto fahren.
Perfectionism